Okay, friends, Romans, and countrymen, lend me your iPods or Androids or whatever the heck you listen to us on. Welcome to episode 2 of season a million of Law and Candor. Season 5, the podcast wholly devoted to pursuing the legal technology revolution. As you all know, I am Bill. I am here with my partner in crime, Rob. And we have a great guest today, Claire Caruso. We'll get to her in a minute. We did that interview with her yesterday. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. But before we get to that, we want to introduce the part of the program that we enjoy doing more than any other and what our listeners are constantly writing in about, and that is
Sightings of Radical Brilliance.
This is the part of the show where we bring to you the latest and greatest in innovation in the legal space. Roberto, what do we have today?
You know, this is interesting. I think it makes sense that a lot of our sightings are going to have to do with COVID-19 and, you know, what we have going on in the world today. But this one is about a company called Solos Health Analytics that has developed a new product that they call FeverGaurd. And what this basically is, it's a wearable device. It looks like it's something you wear actually under your arm that constantly monitors your temperature, you know, creates kind of a baseline because everybody has a slightly different, kind of core basic temperature. And then if you start to deviate from that, I guess it triggers some kind of an alert letting you know that you might be developing a fever and eventually, COVID, I guess. Kind of interesting, brings up a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think, it certainly brings up a lot of questions around PI, and it would be interesting also if it somehow formed a scarlet letter on your head so that everybody else could be aware of it, because I'm not really quite sure that somebody knows, okay, wow, my temperature went up. Now I have to trust that these people are going to take action and go home rather than stand next to me in line at the coffee shop. But I do think that, from an analytics perspective, when I read this story originally, I was thinking of you because of analytics, obviously, but this is a lot of data that they're going to keep on hand, this company, so that they can monitor, again, all for the greater good, but that's a lot of personal health information that they're going to have.
It's just kind of funny, the unintended consequences. I don't know if you read this story, it was a couple months ago, but it was basically, someone that got caught for cheating because their heart rate data from their phone, their significant other saw that it was spiking at 2:00 in the morning on certain times,
I did not see that.
It's a crazy story, and it just kind of illustrates the fact that there's always unintended consequences. I agree with you. It'd be great to know that you had a fever. Maybe if your phone beeped when you got close to people so that they would know too. But
sure,
again, it raises all those issues. That's a lot of data to collect. Does it get used in the right way? Interesting.
Where is it getting stored? Can this company get hacked? Is this the kind of information that they're sharing with other apps or other providers? Like with Apple or with Android or with Google. Yeah, that's all. All of that stuff is, I didn't see, I don't know if they purposely, but I didn't read that in the article, and that's nowhere on their website. I'm sure it's in some sort of when you download the app, you have to accept and agree. It'd be interesting to read that though, because what are they doing with that personal information? And, in this day and age with, DSARs and things that you could file, it would certainly be interesting to see what companies like this would have to keep on file and then what they're doing with that information.
Well, and just the fact that, here's just yet another metric about all of us, that can get tracked, and you start to aggregate all this together, and pretty soon it's every aspect of your life, is recorded in some way. And as you kind of put that together, it's again, the long-term implications are just really interesting.
Yeah, I agreed. Yeah. So I think this is a story you should definitely take a look at. I think keep an eye on this and all COVID related testing. Again, I think they're all done with, I'm sure most of them are done all with well-intended, but to the unintended consequences are really the interesting part. Well, at least for us here for the podcast, because we're constantly looking for content.
I mean, if they could develop something that let us know when Bill was in a bad mood, that would be more useful to me.
Well, I could tell you when it is. It's whenever I wake up my wife too early, because that sets her off, and then she sets me off. But other than that, I generally am like human Prozac. I'm always in a good mood.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to jump now to episode 2 of the season, Scaling Your eDiscovery Program, Self-Service to Full Service. We are thrilled to have our colleague and friend, Claire Caruso, joining us today. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Law and Candor. We are especially excited to have our guest, Claire Caruso, who is part of our Lighthouse team. And Claire, maybe just to give our many, many listeners a little bit of background on yourself, how did you get to Lighthouse?
Sure. So first of all, thank you very much for hosting me. I appreciate it. My role here at Lighthouse is Director of Spectra Sales. I have been in the eDiscovery industry for 6 years. I live in Chicago. I'm originally from Iowa. And I think my background has led me to this really unique position for a couple of reasons. I studied marketing and management in school, and I was actually in the country's largest incubator for students pursuing a startup. So cut my teeth pitching to real-life VCs, built out business plans, did pitch competitions, you name it. Ended up in sales, but I've always had a passion for entrepreneurship, and I'm really excited about what we're building out.
Yeah, and then when did you start the mail-in letter campaign to try to get on Lauren Candor? Was that after, that was sometime between when you heard about us and when you got the job here? Was that when that happened?
Yeah, it was actually before. I was highly anticipating this and counting down the days.
Yeah, the most amount of fan mail we get is from you and my mom. That's it. So, all right, let's talk about this, because this is a really interesting topic. And I think, more and more, we're starting to see more and more clients want that self-service option, but they also want the ability to scale to full service. So what do they need to be sort of mindful of when you're talking about, when would a client actually need to go from self-service to full service, and then even maybe back to self-service?
Sure. So anytime a client is looking to do self-service, they might be looking at a couple of different things. Wanting control over their own queue, wanting their own team to do their own ECA, insight into really specific reporting that they may or may not be getting right now, as well as control over their own hosted footprint. Those are some reasons self-service is a good option on initially. In terms of scaling to full service, anytime you've got an internal investigation or any matter really that gets too large, too fast, that isn't anticipated, that's a really good time to have full service available for scaling.
Claire, that's a really good point. It brings I think a real example of, you have situations where, you might want to go from self-service, back to full service, or you might even want to go back again. If you're kind of looking at making those transitions, what are some of the things that you need to look out for?
Sure. So, clean handoffs are really important in that situation. You want to make sure that you know who you're calling when, you've got a whole protocol laid out. And you also want to make sure that the database is going to transfer well. So I know anybody who's ever had to transfer something, done an ARM backup, it's extremely tedious. There's a lot of time and energy involved with that. If you can keep everything in that same database, scaling from a self-service to a full service, that's going to be extremely beneficial for you and your team.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because you'll lose the ability to audit the database if you have to go from self-service and transfer to a new database for full service, and audit logging and things like that all become a nightmare. Plus, deduping can become a nightmare. That's a great point that I think everybody should sort of take note. All right, so now that we sort of outlined, you touched on some benefits, you touched on some points to look out for. We try to leave our listeners, as you know, being a super fan, we try to leave our listeners with some recommendations and best practices. What should folks sort of take into account if they're looking to optimize this transition or put this process in place where they would have an ability to go from self-service to full service?
Sure. I think it's really important to understand where your team's capabilities lie, and also what their size, what's their bandwidth. Are you staffed for second requests or 24/7 support, or are you not? Are there certain areas in which you have, a little bit more strength than others? And who do you call? What is your current protocol if something happens where you need, eDiscovery, be it self-service or full service? Who are you calling? Are they doing a good job? Making sure that you're auditing that process. And are they giving you a one-size-fits-all situation, or are you actually getting a service provider who's meeting you where you are as a true partner and customizing that process for you? And then memorializing that. I think if you've got a playbook and your team understands that playbook, and this is a circumstance in which we're going to go completely self-service. Here's a circumstance that could potentially scale all the way up to full service. And then when are we going to do self-service again, or a combo of all of them?
And Claire, when you think of, clients, that you've seen that have kind of done this really well, what are some of the other factors that, or procedures that they've been able to implement just to kind of have this go smoothly?
So, I think that goes back to preparedness. If you're thinking about, hey, maybe we have this investigation, it's potentially going to turn into a government investigation. Do we want our people pushing the buttons for that, becoming an expert witness, or do we have a neutral third party we can call on in that instance to scale that up or hand that matter off?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like in the past, it had to do more about the size of a matter. Like, if it was really small, it was a better, option for self-service. If it was really big, it was an option for, maybe more for full service. But it feels like that line's getting a little more blurred lately. Is it like, are the systems just more capable now? Or, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen a lot of strides in the past couple of years with the self-service space in terms of threshold with data capabilities. I've seen multiple terabytes push through a number of self-service options. So it's definitely not just a small matter, quote unquote, situation anymore.
Yeah, it seems like it's more about the internal capabilities of the team that's actually running this, and less about the technology these days. So I am, for one, I can't speak for Rob, and I often don't. I'm for one very glad that we relented and allowed a superfan on. I think this was really great. I like this topic. I think it's coming up more and more, and I'm just going to recap. So the theme I think throughout this, and I think that one of the themes that came across was preparedness, right? Understanding your own capabilities, understanding your own internal bandwidth, and then developing a process around that. Some of the benefits were, controlling your own queue, being able to run ECA, having, getting some insight into some reporting that you ordinarily wouldn't have if you're going through a full service SaaS model, and reducing your hosting footprint. The other thing you touched on that I thought was interesting is being able to move the project from self-service to full service without necessarily moving data between databases, which I think we touched on being a real importance and something that can oftentimes get overlooked, especially on the dedupe side and the auditing side. And then I think you brought up a couple other points on, what are some of the other reasons, I think, having a neutral third party involved. So understanding what this case might evolve into and whether or not expert testimony might be necessary. If that's the case, maybe you do want a neutral third party on it, i.e. a vendor. And then I think to tie a bow on it, it's to memorialize this entire process through a playbook. I think that's important because then you have some clear guidelines, regardless of which litigator is working on the case, which internal lit support or legal technology person is working on the case, which law firm is working on the case. Regardless, if you have this all memorialized in this process, what could sometimes be complicated can break down by have some simple rules to break out the process. So I think that these are all great guidelines and best practices, which is what we tried to leave our listeners with. And if you want, Rob and I will send back those 8.5 by 10 black and white, pictures of ourselves signed and autographed, and you can hang them in your local diner. So we'll get those off to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm also waiting on the merch. So
Yeah. We have a 6-foot cardboard cutout of Rob coming. And before you ask, yes, that really is his skin tone.
I can't wait. I'll dress him up for Halloween.
Yeah, you should. Make sure you put sunblock even put sunblock even on the cardboard cutout though, because you put it in the sun, he actually gets burned. It's very voodoo doll.
It's kind of like having an extra nightlight, in your house.
I like that.
Very, very functional.
Claire, this has been great. Thank you so much for doing this. We really do appreciate it. And I think I think the listeners are going to like this one.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Claire.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, listen to me, party people. You think this is a free lunch? There is no free lunch. If you enjoyed what you just heard, you have to subscribe to Law and Candor. Subscribe to it on whatever platform that you listen to it on. Subscribe to it, because if we don't get enough subscribers, we're not going to have enough budget to keep Rob on. And this is a partner game, okay? So please subscribe, resubscribe, get your friends to subscribe, set up phony email accounts and subscribe on all of them. Subscribe your parents. They love it. I know my mom does. And then we'll keep Rob around.